What if Pokemon never had gimmicks? No Mega Evolution, no Terastallization, no Dynamaxing. What will the world of Pokemon look like without these things? Well, the world ends, and possibly the universe too. But let's step back and start from the very beginning and see how we get there. Starting with Generation 1. Version exclusives. If the original Pokemon games had a quote-unquote gimmick, this would be it, because Pokemon Red and Green popularized the idea of locking content behind different versions of a game. If you had Pokemon Red, no Vulpix. If you had Blue, no Scyther. So in the actual lore of Pokemon, what would the world look like without version exclusives? Well, I think trade evolutions wouldn't exist, because here's why. Have you ever heard of the Machoke and Graveler theory, where their evolutions almost look like their DNA got swapped in the trade? Because if you notice, Machamp gains Graveler's extra arms, but loses its reptilian features, while Golem gains a lizard head, but loses its arms. It's almost like Game Freak was hinting at some kind of Pokemon fusion through trade all the way back in Generation 1. Maybe even through Bill's teleporter accident, where he accidentally turned himself into a Pokemon. He fused with the Pokemon's DNA through a trade. And the later games leaned into this even harder, because, for example, Carrot Blast and Shellmint are a literal parasitic armor trade. One steals the other's protection to gain armor, while the other has to make up in his speed in his evolution to survive, which is why a Scavalier suddenly gains armor in his evolution, while Cellular gains immense speed. Other examples are like Slowpoke when it becomes smarter as a Slowking by putting on the King's Rock in a trade, or Onyx when it fuses with the Metal Coat to become a Steelix in a trade. Seizure becomes a Dragon type after fusing with the Dragon Scale, and Porygon 2 gets infected by the Dubious Disc and evolves into a literal corrupted DNA, a trade that goes wrong for the Pokemon. So without version exclusives in the world of Pokemon, trading probably doesn't exist, since the whole point behind trading in the original games was to catch them all. And without trading, all these evolutions would probably look completely different or just not exist. But Champ would just have 2 arms. Milotic would remain ugly without the Prism Scale. And Scizor, he probably wouldn't even have steel armor. It looked more like his beta design right here, where he's like a green, bigger Scyther version of itself. And this video is sponsored by Whatnot, and we're giving away some Pokemon cards. Whatnot is an awesome place where you can buy, sell, and auction pretty much anything, from Pokemon cards and video games to even comic books and more. And the best part, you can jump into live streams, bid in real time, and try to win whatever you got your eye on, all while supporting local game shops. I actually found one shop selling retro games, and I decided to grab a few of my old favorites from the GameCube era. I got Pokemon Coliseum, I got Kirby Air Ride, and I even got Mario Party 7, which I've never played before. So I'm excited to try it with my friends when they come over. I even got Donkey Kong Bonanza because, well, I just got a Switch 2 recently, and I love Donkey Kong. The sellers were super chill, and it felt great supporting a small business. And of course, I had to grab some Pokemon cards because Whatnot is the place to find awesome ones. I scored a Blastoise EX, a PSN9 Shiny Charmander, an Alternate Art Eevee and Pecharunt, and this amazing Charizard card. And I'm giving away all these cards to one lucky viewer who signs up for Whatnot using my link down below. Just click the link down below, make an account, and you'll get $15 off your first purchase. And drop your username down below in the comments, and I'll pick one lucky winner to win the entire lot. Signing up with my link also directly supports me when you make your first purchase, so it's a win-win for both of us. You get $15 and I get a little bit as well. So check out Whatnot today using my link down below and get $15 off your first purchase. And have some fun hunting for Pokemon cards and even video games if you're a collector like me. It's a cool place and check it out. Now, back to the video. Generation 2, Held Items. I would say out of all the new mechanics Pokemon Gold and Silver introduced, Held Items would be the most gimmicky of them all. And believe it or not, this is where the Pokemon universe really starts to fall apart. Because Arceus, the god of Pokemon, relies on Held Items to channel its power. I'm talking about the plates, the building blocks of the Pokemon universe. Because just listen to a few of their engravings. The Earth Plate. When the universe was created, its charge became this plate. The Stone Plate. It gathers power from the plates, listening for the flute's song. The Insect Plate, where all creation was born, that is the being's place of origin. And the Metal Plate. The powers of the plates are shared among Pokemon, which all hint that the plates have a lot more power than they're led on to be, and that Arceus actually relies on them. And in the movie Arceus and the Jewel of Life, it is shown that Arceus gets a lot of his power from the plates, even to the point where it's weakened and even almost dies when it loses them. And in Legends Arceus, where Held Items aren't even part of the game, Arceus still has to interact with the plates as key items to change its typing. Not to mention that his entire ability, multi-type, relies on this gimmick. So no Held Items means Arceus is stuck as a normal type Pokemon with no real way to keep the universe at balance, at least from what we know. On a much smaller scale, a lot of Pokemon completely lose their identity without Held Items. Chansey is no longer the lucky Pokemon without its lucky egg. Farfetch isn't a walking metaphor anymore, based on the Japanese saying, a duck comes bearing onions, without its leek. Kadabra and Alakazam can no longer channel their psychic powers to their spoons or eat delicious poop, since a pair of their spoons make anything taste good. Magnemite with no magnets, it's just a floating circular eyeball, which looks like nightmare fuel. And worst of all, Cubone has no bone. It's just a sad little guy with his mother's skull on his face. I guess the only Pokemon that truly benefits from no holding an item is Yamask, since it's not forced to hold on to his past human face anymore, which must be torture for it. But yeah, at worst, Arceus cannot hold on to the power of the universe and keep it at balance, and at the best, Yamask isn't depressed anymore. So those are the extremes of the no held item gimmick in Pokemon. But yeah, no held items in the Pokemon universe means Arceus is just a cosmic llama that probably can't even control the elements of the universe and keep it at balance. So no universe. Generation 3, Pokemon abilities. And this is when the world gets really weird. Because right off the bat, a world without this gimmick, Slaking becomes a box art Pokemon. Basically a legendary Pokemon because it no longer has the Truant ability. And if you didn't know, Slaking has the highest base stat total of any non-legendary Pokemon, and the same as Groudon and Kyogre, which makes it the strongest non-legendary Pokemon in the game by a whopping 70 points. With the next Pokemon in line being a pseudo-legendary Pokemon like Dragonite or Goodra. So we would have Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Opal with Slaking, I guess, and the Emerald with Rayquaza. On the other side of the spectrum, Shedinja becomes the absolute worst Pokemon without his Wonder Guard ability. With only 1 HP, it would fade to a literal breath of air. It died. Some Pokemon would just completely lose their identity, like Gyarados. Without Intimidate, it's not a ferocious, terrifying beast anymore. Just look at it. It has a stupid face now. Same goes for Groudon and Kyogre. Without their weather abilities, they're no longer world-ending threats that require Rayquaza to step in. They're just ancient monsters with beef who occasionally battle each other. And without their weather abilities, the entire plot of Ruby and Sapphire doesn't even happen. And Team Aqua and Magma don't even form because they idolize Groudon and Kyogre's ancient weather powers. Watch my What If Every Villain Won in Pokemon video right here to know what I mean by that. And speaking of plot lines, Ash Greninja doesn't exist in the anime without Battle Bond, which means that Ash would probably have lost sooner in the Kalos League, and Zygarde would probably have never asked Greninja to help maintain balance in the Kalos region, which might lead to a doomsday scenario of the Kalos region becoming imbalanced with the help of Greninja. But on the other side of the spectrum, again, some Pokemon do benefit from losing their abilities though, just like Slaking. Regigigas doesn't have Slow Start anymore, so hits like a truck from turn 1. Vigoroth can finally fall asleep now without insomnia, meaning he can enter the dream world for the first time ever. Gloom doesn't smell bad anymore thanks to losing Stench, and Archops drops his defeatist mindset, finally believing in itself. And best of all, Garchomp no longer has rough skin, so now it gets that silky, smoothie body feel. Good for them. But there are some Pokemon that just doesn't exist, like Lycanroc for example. Without own tempo, Rockruff can evolve into a dust form Lycanroc, so that evolution just doesn't exist. And all levitating Pokemon probably wouldn't exist either, because how would they move without levitating around, like Metagross or Claydol? The world definitely gets really weird without this gimmick. Generation 4, the physical special splits, and honestly I would say this would be the gimmick of these games. It brought a lot more logic to the Pokemon world, because we've actually seen a world without this gimmick, because before Diamond and Pearl, whether a move was physical or special didn't depend on what the move did, but rather on its typing. Fire, Water, Electric Grass, Ice, Psychic Dragon, and Dark type moves were always special, and normal Fighting, Flying, Poison, Ground, Rock, Bug, Ghost, and Steel types were always physical. And without the split, so many moves just didn't make sense, like Ghost type moves for instance. The only reason Ghost was considered a physical type back in the original games was probably because of the move Lick. It was the only Ghost type move to have a base power to it, since Nightshade always did a fixed amount of damage based on the user's HP, and Confuse Ray just caused confusion. So yeah, licking something kinda made sense as a physical action at the time, so I guess it being a Ghost type move that's physical made sense. But come on, Ghosts are supposed to be intangible, spectral beings. The idea of them doing physical damage completely broke the logic of their entire identity. It just didn't make sense for Ghost type moves to do physical damage. They should have been special. But it was the opposite for Dark type moves, because every single move before the split was clearly a physical action. Bite, Crunch, Beat Up, Thief, Knock Off, even Snatch. How are you biting or mugging someone without physically touching them? Are you just politely asking them to bite themselves and hand over their wallet? It just made no sense as special type moves. And because they were all considered special attacks, Pokemon like Mightyena, Sharpedo, Absol, and Sneasel completely lost their identity. These Pokemon were designed to fight with claws, fangs, and brute force, not special energy beams that Dark type moves were meant to be, I guess. But out of every Pokemon that was affected by this weird split at the time, Hitmonchan is probably the biggest victim of all. His entire identity is being a boxer, yet all his elemental punches, like Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, and Ice Punch, were special moves. And Hitmonchan's special stat is really bad. So before his splits, he wasn't a hard-hitting boxer. He was just a dude with wet gloves, it felt like. Generation 5, hidden abilities. A world without this gimmick doesn't change that much, but there are a few really interesting cases that I'm going to tell you about. For example, if you didn't know, the original hidden abilities of the legendary beasts were the same as EV evolutions. Raikou had Volt Absorb, Entei had Flash Fire, Suicune had Water Absorb. It's a subtle detail, but it adds even more weight to the theory that the 3 Pokemon who perished in the burnt tower were actually EV evolutions. And when Ho-Oh revived them, it turned them into legendary beasts. So without hidden abilities in the world of Pokemon, that clue disappears entirely. Then there are some Pokemon who just completely lose their entire identity without their hidden ability, like Darmanitan. Without Zen mode, it can't meditate and unlock its psychic powers, meaning it remains as a pure fire-type Pokemon forever, never learns how to meditate. Ditto becomes a lot worse too, since it has to mainly use Transform instead of jumping into battle with Imposter. And I guess moody Pokemon like Bidoof are no longer moody, so maybe these Pokemon would actually benefit from a world without this gimmick. They finally got some counseling or something. But worst of all, Durant loses its Truant ability, so it's no longer a true ant. We lose the pun, and honestly this might be the biggest tragedy of them all. Generation 6, Mega Evolution, our first official gimmick in this video. And this is where things get catastrophic in the world of Pokemon, because without it, the entire Earth is at risk. Because in the Delta episode of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, a world-ending meteor is hurling towards the planet, and the only way to stop it is for Rayquaza to Mega Evolve and destroy it. And just looking at this frame right here, compared to Rayquaza's 35-foot long body, that meteor is easily over 1,000 feet wide. And to put that into perspective, that is nearly 5 times larger than the Tunguska meteor, the biggest impact event in recorded history, which flattened over 800 square miles of forest. That's the size of a city like Los Angeles or New York, completely wiped off the map. So without Mega Evolution, Rayquaza probably wouldn't have the power to stop it, and given its size, this thing could have caused an extinction level event. The shockwaves, tsunamis, and climate fallout would have obliterated Hoenn, Rex, Kanto, and Johto, and left the rest of the Pokemon world buried under volcanic winters, which honestly might have explained what happened in the timelines where Mega Evolution doesn't exist, like the first 5 generations of the games, or maybe even in Guzzler's Fallout native world, where an apparent apocalypse happened. But besides, you know, the world ending, a lot of other stuff would change too. The Paradox Pokemon Roaring Moon probably wouldn't exist. This is heavily implied to be a Paradox version of Mega Salamence. The Draconic people of Hoenn would vanish too, since their whole identity revolves around Mega Evolution and Rayquaza. And as we've seen in the new Legends ZA trailer, even Lumio City wouldn't be overrun by rogue Mega Pokemon. I guess the one upside to Mega Evolution not existing, with the world still ending, I guess, but let me look at the bright side, is that Mega Pokemon wouldn't be in constant pain. Because yeah, all of these deck situations imply that Mega Evolution is pure suffering for the Pokemon. Glalie jaw literally breaks, Scissor's body melts from his side, and Tyranitar, its back straight up splits into 2. God, that must hurt. Generation 7, Z moves, and honestly a world without this gimmick is mostly the same, but there's one big reason it still stands out, and I'll explain why. So here's the breakdown. In Sun and Moon, Necrozma is the legendary Pokemon from Ultra Space that spreads its infinite light across different worlds, including Earth and a place called Ultra Megalopolis. But the people of Megalopolis become greedy and try to imprison Necrozma to harness its power, and in retaliation, Necrozma lashes out, devours their sun, and plunged their entire world into complete darkness, then fled to Earth to recover. But to stop Necrozma from doing the same thing from devouring Earth's sun to recover, the topping Pokemon fought back and severely injured it, forcing it to flee once again into the deep Ultra Space. And from those injuries, Z crystals were made, since they're literal fragments of Necrozma's body that fell to the ground. So if Z moves didn't exist, that means Z crystals don't exist either. Then therefore Necrozma doesn't exist as well. And without Z crystals, the entire culture of Alola changes pretty drastically. They probably have gyms instead of trials, since totem Pokemon get their power from Z energy. Ultra Beasts would be a lot weaker too, and probably not even legendary level, since they're also powered by these Z crystals. And even Team Skull might not have formed, since their whole identity is built around rebelling against the island's challenges. So yeah, nothing really world ending, unless you want to say Necrozma defeating the type of Pokemon is a possible outcome, because for it to recover, it would devour the Earth's sun, and therefore the Earth would freeze out and the entire world would just freeze and everyone would die. But honestly, I think a world without Z crystals just means a world without Necrozma, since they are one of the same thing. Generation 8, Dynamaxing. Well, many competitive players consider the worst gimmick in all of Pokemon. But thankfully, I'm only talking about the lore in Pokemon in this video, because I actually love this gimmick. But in terms of the world without it, it doesn't seem to change much. And here's why. Just like how Z-Crystals came from Necrozma, the Galar particles that make Dynamaxing possible all originate from Eternatus. Because when it crash landed on Galar from a meteor over 20,000 years ago, it created power spots throughout the entire region, special zones where Dynamaxing becomes possible. So if Dynamaxing never existed, that means no Galar particles, which means either Eternatus never existed or never crash landed here in the first place. And that actually does change a lot about Galar's culture. It makes one Pokemon in particular way more important. For instance, all of Galar's stadiums were built around power spots so Pokemon could Dynamax during gym battles. Without Eternatus and the Galar particles, those stadiums probably end up like Spike Booth's gym, just regular buildings with no giant Pokemon fights, and no cultural phenomenon around these battles. There's also no Darkest Day without Eternatus, which means Chairman Rose has nothing to panic about in the games and doesn't become a villain, and Sonia never becomes a professor either, since their entire research is based on that event. Plus, the two ancient heroes talked about during the Darkest Day never rise to fame, meaning Galar's entire monarchy might have existed in the first place. And Calyrex, the legendary Pokemon, remains king, like mentioned in his Pokedex entries. And speaking of Calyrex, this is the Pokemon that becomes very important in a world without Dynamaxing, because without this gimmick, the biggest change of all is that it becomes the only Pokemon that can Dynamax, or something similar to Dynamaxing. Because if you didn't know, Calyrex doesn't depend on Eternatus Galar particles to become larger, as you can see with his blue aura compared to Eternatus' red aura, and all Galar Pokemon who Dynamax as well. So yeah, nothing really much changes except for the complete erasure of Glacier's monarchy and culture. So Galar is probably a completely different place without Dynamaxing. And finally, Generation 9, Terastallization. Probably the least impactful gimmick in the world of Pokemon, funnily enough. Even though in competitive, it's been one of the most impactful gimmicks to date. But in terms of the actual Pokemon world, it's pretty much the same. And here's why. Because for one, Area Zero was only explored about 200 years ago, and the Terra Orb itself was invented just 10 years before the events of Scarlet and Violet. So if Terastallization never existed, the culture of Paldea wouldn't really change that much. The Academy still thrives, Team Star still rebels, and the gym challenges goes on, just without a flashy terrestrial twist at the end. The only major difference is that Terapagos wouldn't exist, and since Terapagos is the source of all Terastallization, that changes everything behind the scenes. Because its ancient colony is what formed Area Zero, and the crystals it left behind are what caused the phenomenon in the first place. So no Terapagos means no Terra Crystals, no Terra Crystals mean no Paradox Pokemon, and no Titan Pokemon either. Without them, Heath never records their data in the Scarlet and Violet journals. No journals means no Professor Sada and Turo never become obsessed with the phenomenon. No obsession means no time machine. No time machine means Harada and Murata never show up to kill the professors. No death means Arvid has emotionally available living parents. And emotionally available living parents means Arvid never falls in their footsteps to Area Zero, which means Malbostif is never critically injured and almost dies. So basically, in the world without Terastallization, Arvid has stable parents and Malbostif is a happy dog. So there you go.